While in Connecticut, we went to the movies a couple of times, and we saw Lords of Salem, Rob Zombie's new film, which came out this weekend, right?
Yeah, I guess it's not playing in Canada, but it's playing on 300 screens in the U.S., so it's got a fair amount of places where people can see it right now.
Yeah, which I thought was terrible. If there is ever a film to genuinely deem pretentious, it's this movie. Anyone who watches Tree of Life and thinks that that's pretentious, watch Rob Zombie attempt at the surreal, and it is truly revolting.
That's disappointing. I felt like from the trailers, this might be the first Rob Zombie movie that I could really get into. But I don't think you're alone. I've heard a lot of other negative opinions.
I mean,
Jay, would you clarify your... Oh, sorry, I'm talking too loud. Would you clarify your use of the term revolting?
Well, there are two ways you could say it's revolting. It's desperately provocative in that there are scenes, like all Rob Zombie movies, where he's trying to push some sort of boundaries, and it starts with a witch scene in Salem, and the witches are cutting a baby out of the stomach of a pregnant witch, and then when they're not satisfied with this baby, start spitting in its face. And imagine that in a Rob Zombie movie, and of course it's all witches screaming and being obnoxious, and it's at 11 constantly, and it's revolting in the end because he dedicates so much time to just this surreal imagery that's completely uninspired, and talking about oblivion, drawing reference from other science fiction films. Rob Zombie does the same with the horror genre, but it's so surface and adds nothing to the movie. Like, he breaks down the movie into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like The Shining, and you'll get like the Monday, Tuesday, and it's like, why is this happening other than just saying this is like The Shining? And in the surreal moment, there are images that are like The Shining, where it's Sherry Moon Zombie sitting on a stack of glowing white boxes with red drapes coming down like blood, and her sitting in a trance, and then it cuts to the other end, and you see three faceless men dressed in Pope costumes masturbating giant red dildos slowly. It's a very student film. And
sounds better every minute here.
Yeah.
You're talking.
As, you know, Velvet Underground plays in the background, and Sherry Moon Zombie is her usual completely terrible self. She's given, again, way too much to do, and she plays a radio DJ along with the guy from Dawn of the Dead, who's been in a couple of Rob Zombie films, and someone else who I didn't recognize, but is basically dressed up to look exactly like Rob Zombie for no reason other than Rob Zombie likes all of his male characters to look like himself unless they're black. And they play three radio DJs, and the way I explained this to Roman, and we've talked about this before, this idea of movies a long time ago, if there was a profession that someone was representing, very little work would go into researching that profession. So you'd just make it work based on kind of the general observations that you would draw from that specific profession. So one example that we were talking about was there's a Columbo episode where John Cassavetes plays a composer. And the worst part is his composing is literally just like the most static, like how a little kid would play composing. And at the time, you know, it's not like now where if that role was in a movie today, they would put that actor in a 3-month composer boot camp, and
right,
they would get paid for it, and they'd come out the other end being able to mimic the simple gestures of composing to some sort of realistic extent. But Cassavetes just does it how, you know, you imagine it being done. And in this movie, the version of that is these radio DJs, and how Rob Zombie writes their dialogue. It's the most basic boiled down version of a radio DJ trio, a morning radio trio, where the humor is terrible. They're doing all the sound effects stuff, you know, the soundboard, which doesn't suit them at all because they're all these 70s dirty hipster, goth clown kind of people playing all of these old 70s classic rock albums, but they're doing this morning radio thing seemingly unironically, this sincere morning radio show, and it's so not funny. And
maybe it's supposed to be satire, though.
I don't think so. And just some of the dialogue is just really terrible. Like there's a character he's a character actor. He played the dad in the Harry and the Hendersons sitcom. You know the guy?
He's an X-Men.
Yeah. He's a witch expert who runs the Witch Wax Museum, which I don't think we ever got to see. And his wife is played by the Hispanic woman from The Running Man. And again, Rob Zombie just randomly trying to be like Tarantino and pulling all of these character actors from these celebrated cult films and putting them in roles that are really not appropriate, and there's no thought behind it. It's just wanting to transplant some of his favorite character actors and emulate the Tarantino effect. Right. To no effect. And so she's talking to him about his witch museum, and just this kind of, you know, he says, I guess it's running into trouble, and he's like, yeah, who knows, it'll probably end up being replaced by a Starbucks. Like, that line in itself is representative of the amount of thought going into the script.
Satire.
Complete satire. So I was going in, I was kind of concerned that it was really, because I was hearing it was very surreal, and people were comparing it to the surreal moments in Halloween 2. And I thought the whole movie was going to be like that. Luckily it isn't. That's the one saving grace. Is the plot is actually kind of interesting, where these radio DJs receive an album mysteriously called The Lords, and then one of them deems them the Lords of Salem because they're from Salem, and it comes in this wood box, and they play it, and it's this very abstract soundscape, and it goes over the radio, and it affects the women of Salem because there's a curse, and so it goes from there. It's just in the last, so that all that stuff is fairly rooted in the real world. There's a Polanski sort of Rosemary's Baby feel, where the owner of her apartment and the two sisters are kind of like a coven trying to get her to come down and turn her into some witch leader or something. And that feels like Rosemary's Baby. There's the mysterious apartment number 5 at the end of her hall with the tracking shots straight out of The Shining. And as this plot progresses, things become more hallucinatory as she is being affected by this music, until it hits the last 15 minutes or so, 15 or 20 minutes, where it's an all-out student film art, attempt at some sort of art that is stealing from Kubrick and his own music videos, and is mostly laughable and uninspired and, like I said, completely pretentious.
So is the reason it's not showing in Canada due to censorship issues?
I don't think so. I think it's just a distribution thing.
I don't believe it has been censored in Canada. It did play at the Toronto Film Festival, so.
Your feet's too big. Don't want you 'cause your feet's too big. You remember that? Harry and the Hendersons theme song?
No. Don't.
No, I've got it stuck in my head. What a good show.